I'm going to talk about a project that started about 8 years ago with my partner Barbara Launder that's based in walking and human mobility. 4 years of that was also devoted to another project that our colleague Brian Lilly from Dalhousie Architecture was involved with. It was called basically Walking the Debris Field, Public Geographies of the Halifax Explosion. It was a project that started out with some very simple investigations or possibilities for what walking in the tradition of psychogeography to some degree and urban geography might reveal. And we were working with technologies, mobile media technologies and so on. And it started out pretty simple. And it grew into something that we had no idea that it would become. So by the end of 4 years, we had worked with 85 collaborators. We had worked across a variety of different communities, both with the various people who were in the neighborhoods that we were investigating and so on. It grew quite organically in a scope that it was beyond that. Since then, my partner Barbara and I have begun a new project that has to do with atmospheres, walking in atmospheres. And to some degree, what we just did a few minutes ago, where we all stood up and took that 1 minute stretch, much of what I'm going to talk about looks a lot like that. When I'm talking about the LAS, the first research question concerns the possibility of architecture and human mobility that is not defined by foundations, walls, infrastructure, borders, or other containment systems. The second question regarding the Living Architecture System Group Directive regarding organicism intersects with theories of agential and speculative realism and the Anthropocene. Who or what has or will have the right to breathe? And having said that, it sounds not great because it's pointing to a difficult future. But Philip said something earlier today about just how the vulnerability that we might be facing at this point in time is also a point or an entry point for opportunity and optimism. So, I share that sentiment entirely. Being-in-the-Breathable considers the potential for an unbuilt environment within a context of human mobility, evanescence infrastructure, and the formidable question posed by the prospect of anaerobic environments that recapitulate the deep time of organic evolution, the future without oxygen. We're now sort of posing a different question that's moving away from psychogeography into something that might be better termed as psychogeology. So in relationship to walking and being in the breathable implies a transition from the exclusive spatial and visual contingencies of earth and built environments to include the turbulence of air and atmosphere. I think everybody will recognize that graphic. That thin blue line is basically what divides us from the vacuum of space. That's all that's giving us in terms of that envelope for aerobic life. Being-in-the-Breathable is a term that the author Peter Sloterdijk uses to describe how atmosphere as an environment was made explicit by the use of gas warfare during the First and Second World Wars. The atmosphere, the last common space that humans share, lost its innocence when it was used as an environmental weapon. And we're seeing this recur again and again in contemporary history, which again should, for us basically is a cause for concern and alarm. It's also creating situations of large populations of human mobility, which is something we're going to experience more and more of in the near future. So when we talk about walking in human mobility, it may not just be coming back to the phenomenological experience or the sensorial experience we all have, regardless of how we make ourselves mobile in the world, but also the fact that as groups of people, we will be migrating more and more. And I think this is probably a big question, and I have to say I felt really excited about all the presentations today and all the potential opportunities that may come out of the research that people in this room are doing. So if psychogeography sets for itself the study of specific effects of the geographical environment on the emotions and behavior of individuals, as well as the division of the city into zones of distinct psychic atmosphere, then psychogeology considers these experiences of mobility in relation to deep time. In July 2017, we were invited to go to Sokolowsko, Poland, for a festival of ephemeral art. The curator asked us to propose a project, and we ended up proposing a walking project that was site-specific. Sokolowsko is the site of the very first tuberculosis sanatorium in Europe. It was the model for which Davos was based on. Davos is the Swiss sanatorium that's written about by Thomas Mann in The Magic Mountain. So in addition to the mobile performance, we installed an exhibition of related images and so on. What's interesting about this site is there's a couple things about it. One, it's in a really beautiful setting where the atmosphere and the quality of air and the possibility of slowing down, so if I'm thinking about this idea of deep time, becomes in fact a kind of healing process for people who are suffering from respiratory problems. It was also a place where wealthy people went to die, to be honest. It wasn't open to everybody. Franz Kafka wanted to go there and could not afford to go there when he learned that he had tuberculosis. So we begin from the position that walking is a creative medium and methodology. The history and contemporary practice of walking asserts that it is a means of generating thought and knowledge through embodied experience. An active awareness of walking and mobility as a diverse and creative act cultivates an opportunity to consider a deeper comprehension of environment and space. Walking is a sensorial experience. The senses provide both distal and proximal relationships to the world that inform our knowledge and understanding of place. The ubiquity of technologically mediated space affects the experience of knowledge generation gained through walking. As pedestrians, we are networked into multimodal sensorial experiences while walking and interacting with mobile devices. So part of what we're at the very early stages of questioning and just this very simple practice of human mobility is how does architecture move with us? Most of what we're seeing, and even in the thoughts of architecture now, exist in the sense that there's a stationary place. So I'll walk you really quickly through the walk. There was an event score. There were 80 people. This particular action was based on quarantine, or the idea of quarantine space, the space you have to keep in a distance from each other. Moving is knowing, so we asked people to keep the quarantine space during this event, and I'm just showing you a few examples of what happened in the walk. This was a breathing project that we did along the way. So what was happening with these 80 people is they're all kind of interacting in a variety of ways with each other and so on. This gives another idea of just where social media begins in terms of how people interact with one another. So then we finish off with the discovery of the environment took place in the trenches of World War I. Gas war combined all of the three 20th century operative criteria, terrorism, design consciousness, and environmental approach, into a densely interconnected whole. The air lost its innocence with the gas attacks. This is what it looks like inside. We had an opportunity of being in a nice white cube, but we decided we would show in the patient rooms that are still being renovated. It seems to be a better place to be. And I took some artifacts back from a previous trip that I'd made to Poland. This was one roll of film that I'd shot at the Majdanek concentration camp where Zyklon B had been used. So it was one artifact that I took back. On the right-hand side of this is actually a bottle of iodine that was given out to the Polish population during the Chernobyl crisis. They learned about it about a week or 10 days after the nuclear cloud had already gone over Poland at that point in time. It's very small. It was about this big. It was given to me by the curator of the show when I was there in 1988. And it's now in the collection of the Canada Science and Technology Museum. We're interested in some of the work that people like Sean Lawley's doing because in a sense, within his work of idea of creating architecture through energy systems, we can see how mobility and architecture could come together. We're looking at various organisms that function within anaerobic spaces. So something like Lucifera, which is a recent organism that's been designed, basically researched over the last little while, lives deep in sediment, but it's actually an organism that functions without aerobic environments. And so, in summary, we're doing ongoing and site-specific field work, both in Poland and the UK. We're modeling aerobic and anaerobic environments using fabrication systems and vacuums. We're very interested in the CERN cloud chamber, the cosmics leaving outdoor droplets. This is one place where some of the research that's on CERN actually kind of points back to what Lawley's doing in terms of where we're looking at both biogenic and anthropogenic aerosols that are in the atmosphere and their relationship to energy systems itself. mobile software that incorporates a weather atlas, and hopefully it'll all end up with a symposium and a book. Thanks.